talked about like in the ag space. So you got to design the correct facility, and those requirements can be dependent upon state to state. The EPA is also going to be very heavily involved in terms of what sort of pesticides you use to fertilize and to mature the plants, if you will. So these are different. Again, these are obviously temperature, right? So it's great in Florida to grow. Maybe not so great to grow in other states where it's a little bit colder out, right? So that means, again, you have to then design a facility that can manage those.
Hey guys, it's Mandi with Global Hemp Association. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining. I'm excited about the opportunity to build a relationship and connect this supply chain. I mean, after all, that's why we started the association. Our association was built on the foundation of connecting supply chain, building relationships, and helping you grow your business. Anyone from farmers, manufacturers, and distributors, people that are passionate about the supply chain, and those creating products selling into biofuels, plastics, textiles, construction, and building materials.
So anyways, I'm really, really excited to have you and welcome. Thank you for joining us. For those of you that are new to the show, please follow us on our YouTube channel. On our YouTube channel, there's all of our full-length videos. It's Global Hemp Association and globalhempassociation.org, where you can find more videos, more content, articles, and connections. We've got an awesome directory. So go out and look for us. But if you do like what you're seeing, please like, share, comment, follow, so forth. Anyways, before we get started, I want to give a huge shout out to a couple of our sponsors, Bob Moore Financing and ICS, a compliance system complete seed to bank solution. Anyways, before then, or without further ado, Jason and Jay, I guess is what Jay Jackson, original name or real name is Jason Jackson, right? And then Nick, both from Miebach. I'm excited to have you guys, so thank you very much. But Jason, if you want to get started and go ahead and give me an intro, I'd love to hear where you're from, how you got into this, and what brought you to this place.
Well, thanks, Mandi. Appreciate it. Yeah, so I'll go first, and then I'll let Nick go next. So, Jay Jackson. I've been a manager, or I am a manager with Miebach Consulting. Been with the firm now for 3 years. So my background came from military logistics. Was a Marine Corps officer. Did my undergrad at the Citadel, and then worked in manufacturing, if you will, for Rolls-Royce, moving around a couple different places in the country, and then did a little short stint overseas in England, and then left Rolls-Royce and came to work for Miebach back in 2018, where I originally joined as a senior consultant in our operational excellence pillar, and then since then have been promoted, if you will, and now serving as a manager within our organization, really helping companies and clients and teams with supply chain and ops management, fundamentals, Lean Six Sigma, and I also help our clients with that change management and organizational behavior, kind of understanding and appreciation. As I'm sure Nick will also dovetail into, everything that we do involves some sort of change or recommendation for change. And in order for that change to be successful, you really got to understand and appreciate how the mind works and how individuals work. And they work differently depending on who you are, where you are from, and even on a given day, because things happen, times happen. Somebody could be a very bubbly person normally, but they could just be having a rough day. So for us, what we've seen in order to be successful at Miebach, we appreciate and understand that change management needs to go into that understanding as we do our other consulting practices, whether it be in engineering, operational excellence, network design, so on and so forth. So I live in Indianapolis. I've got 2 kids and a dog, and we're a wild bunch, just down the street from Nick, if you will, in Indy. And as a whole, we're headquartered in Indianapolis for North America operations, but globally we're headquartered in Frankfurt, and we've got offices all around the globe. Here in North America, we have a sister office in Montreal, and I also do a lot of projects for our Canadian and North American clients. And kind of how this all got about is really as regulation is starting to open up here in the U.S. It did before in Canada, but now as it starts to open up here in the U.S., there's a huge opportunity here where we can bring a lot of our expertise to the table here to help cannabis and hemp companies out. So I'll pause there though, and I'll let Nick introduce himself and talk more about himself and about our organization as a whole. So Nick, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. So I've been with the firm, Nick Banich. I'm an equity partner of Miebach. I've been with the firm since 2011, and actually worked in politics before that. Where a lot of people say, how do you go from politics to consulting? And well, if you've been at a big enough company, or even the family-owned ones are the worst, there's politics abound. So worked on tax and infrastructure policy in politics, made the switch over to consulting, which is what my educational background's in. And up until this year, I led the supply chain strategy practice, where we got into network optimization, inventory optimization, S&OP, a lot of more of the strategic transformational activities that our firm does. And then starting this year, I took the position as Chief Revenue Officer in North America. So really focused on customer success. We have such a diverse portfolio of business units. Jay alluded to some of them, the strategy side, the engineering, the actual design of production facilities or distribution environments. The operational excellence group. We have a new digitalization group where we're building out custom tools to get people away from Microsoft Excel and Google Sheets to do all their decision making and make it more sustainable by doing some simple Python coding and connecting the data that is available. We can do some pretty advanced things to help make it so that we're not crunching numbers always in Excel and doing things more sustainably that way. And I had worked a lot previously to the deregulation up in Canada and the opening up on the recreational market. I had worked a lot in tobacco, spirits, and beer. So when we got some of the work, when the Trudeau government pushed for the recreational market to open up to cannabis, I was up there on a lot of our engagements with companies on designing the warehouses, on looking at how they were doing production scheduling, their S&OP processes. Do you hear that background noise?
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
That's awesome. So he's got a very diverse background, a good background, especially coming into cannabis with beer and tobacco and spirits, and now the cannabis lobby or the legislation side.
Yeah, so
political.
We'll talk more about it, but yeah, we've worked, and I've worked with those same types of companies as well. But go ahead, Nick. Please finish.
Yeah,
I love summer vacation. There's nothing better.
I love this. I think it's great.
So, I'd worked personally in a lot of tobacco, beer, spirits work. And so when the Trudeau government pushed for the deregulation, and the recreational market opened up and companies needed to take small scale operations and all of a sudden scale to be a consumer good company. There were chocolate companies trying to get into it. There were grow companies trying to get into the drink business, it wasn't shortly after recreational happened that then it was time to start talking about the edibles market, we had to work with grow companies to become chocolate companies and chocolate companies to become cannabis companies. So anytime there's a lot of volatility and change, like Jay said, that's really where outside expertise, people have seen different things, done different things. I think we can add a lot of value. And so spent a lot of time up in Canada with that work and, anxiously looking at the US market as things are discussed and debated about, when and how we can leverage, the proven work we've done in the industry up in Canada, here in the United States, potentially in the future.
Awesome. Okay, I'm excited about this. So talk to me about your background, some of the projects you've worked on, Jay. We kind of talked about Nick's background. I'd like to kind of hear, what's you've got an also very diverse.
Yeah. So everything from that's, as I'm looking in your living room right now, so the electronics, the clothing, probably the perfume, I've helped companies, whether it be in manufacturing of that product or distributing that product to consumers at the front end. I do a lot of work where I'm actually on either the operational floors, supporting continuous improvement in or Six Sigma type projects or lean projects, doing a lot of things like labor management, understanding, do you have the right productivity that's flowing through your facility? Do you have the right automation? Is there something there that we can do to, help improve your operations in your environment? And I've also helped with alcohol companies finding the right, 3PL suppliers who can manage a lot of the complexities that are found in that industry, right? Like, so for instance, as Nick mentioned in his tax experience, each state has different requirements around bailment and how those products are delivered, stored to their individual states, and then even exported or imported into the US and out of the US. Done a lot of projects where helping pharmaceutical companies implement new software and technology that's going to impact many members of their organization. And, one day I'm pressing one widget or pressing one button, or I'm interacting with one screen one way, again, in the warehousing or manufacturing space. And then tomorrow it's completely different. I'm going from one large vendor to a new large vendor. And how does that change my workload? Does that mean I need to be bringing on more teams, more people, if you will? So kind of like Nick, I've worked with all sorts of industries in the FMCG space, helping chocolate companies, helping alcohol companies in the retail space as well, helping big cosmetic firms, get products out, electronics out as well. So it's really, really diverse. Been able to work in the US, obviously, but also in Canada as well. And I've gotten some opportunities. I'm also on our global and local, if you will, Center of Excellence for Change Management. So I've had opportunities to work with our colleagues overseas as well, and supporting them with how do they best interact, again, with their clients, but even more importantly, with our own teams. We even go through our own change management. So I help our internal organization also think through how do you put together, the right steps, if you will, to A, build that sense of urgency, but then see it completely all the way through. So for me, I'm industry agnostic, if you will, because I support all industries. Yeah.
Okay, so what are some similarities? As I talk about this, and as to why Miebach, right? And when we were talking, Jay, previously, and Nick, I haven't spoken with you before, so chime in at any time, but we've spoken about the diversity of even the team and the experience, even, in some of the similar industries. And you had mentioned the beer and the spirits and companies moving from, farming to edibles, or into the drink industry. What are some other similarities that you're seeing that are coming up in the hemp industry? And specifically around, the industrial market that's just booming, right?
Well, as Nick mentioned, right, you've got chocolate companies who are now trying to make edibles, but now also thinking about clothing companies who are now making hemp clothing. The U.S. government just recently announced that they're looking to develop hemp clothing for their military athletic wear, if you will. And so with that comes the regulations that are surrounding that. So cannabis and hemp, they sit in this uniqueness where, and there's going to be an eventual white paper coming out on this, but they sit in between pharmaceutical and the heavy regulation that goes into pharmaceutical, heavy regulation and taxation that goes into alcohol, spirits, and tobacco. You've got retail, right? So how is it going to be e-commerce, get to the consumers, as well as the accessories in that space? So yeah, sure, you might buy, maybe you go buy some flour, or you go buy an oil from someplace, but then what are the accessories that go with that, right? So like the pots and pans in a normal cooking world, now you're thinking about extracting type of in-home equipment, right? Or some of the other accessories that might come in that space. And then agriculture is the fourth biggest one as well, right? Farmers, we've been farming and making corn and other great products for years, right? But now that we're doing cannabis and hemp as well, how do you now make sure that you're always producing the right product, a consistent product, a product that meets regulations, right? And there's a lot of in and out of testing that takes place that a lot of these companies are using 3PLs for, if you will, or outside vendors to scientifically do that lab testing for. Now, as you are growing your business, how do you kind of bring some of that in-house as well? And the last thing before I let Nick chime in here as well, these organizations are growing, and they're growing really quickly, and things are changing again all the time, right? So how do you bring in now good people into your organization who know what they're doing in their various functions? So not just supply chain, but also in accounting, in legal, in finance, and then also obviously in operations, right? How do you build these teams up? How do you bring these people who've probably got different experiences and different industries and now bring them into one big melting pot, if you will? So there's a lot of change and a lot of organizational design that goes into that. So that's where there's a lot of great similarities where I know Miebach can help this, because we help our other clients in other industries do this every day, all day. So Nick, please, if I missed anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when Jay talks about change, right? We saw up in Canada where, pepper and tomato greenhouses got turned overnight into cannabis facilities. and, launching those joint ventures, with those growers, and getting them on board with, this more regulation, and getting on board with the SNO, the SOPs, the standard operating procedures that, the legacy grower had, that now had this joint venture, and they needed to have a meeting of the minds of, whose way of working was going to win. Then now planning with, not just your own grow facility, but now, a collaboration with another farmer, and aligning on, when you're going to expect harvest, what the yield's going to be, all of that complexity gets introduced there. And one benefit about Miebach is that we're not generalist, right? We're not one of the huge, big, major consultancies where if you work in supply chain, you might go from working on, a behavioral change project like Jay specializes in, to an SNOP or inventory project like Guy specialized in. We hyper focus our people so that way, when you're looking for an outside expert to come in, we are very, very deep subject matter experts. And that's why we try to avoid, being focused on industry, because we'd rather focus ourselves on really our area of subject matter expertise, and then understanding in different industries, how do we apply those different things. When you start talking about, this industry and how it's kind of an amalgamation of a agricultural supply chain with a pharmaceutical supply chain, with a consumer goods supply chain, with a food and beverage supply chain, I do think that lends itself well, just with how we organize ourselves internally, because when you start getting to the brass tacks of how do I execute this aspect of what I need to do, if it's more strategic, more tactical, more behavioral, there we bring in specific individuals, right? Because when you hire a firm, it's all about the people that are actually going to be in the room with you. And so we're going to have people that are deep focused expertise on individual aspects in this big buzzword that is supply chain.
Yeah.
So when you have people, go ahead.
I was just saying, and the other thing you hear a lot about in industry is, well, we're different from them, right? Like aerospace, we're different than automotive, different than building an air conditioning unit, right? But there's actually a lot of lessons learned that can be applied to all three industries in that instance. And the same is what can be said about in the cannabis and hemp industry. They will say we are completely different. We are standalone. But honestly, there's a lot of lessons learned, as we just now mentioned here, across 4 other sister industries that actually make sense. And cannabis and hemp are a hybrid where they fall into these 4 industries in some form or fashion. So that's the other stigma that we like to come to the table with and really show and prove. No, yes, you are different. Everyone is unique. It's 2021. We appreciate everybody. Don't get me wrong. However, there are a lot of similarities that can be applied to your industry, and you should, we hope you'll consider that.
Okay, so I've got a question because this comes up a lot. I feel like your transition was perfect, Nick. Like we planned this, but when we talk about similarities and differences from one industry to the next, what are some of the trends you're seeing that either people in the hemp industry or getting into the business are missing? Like, where are they off? Where's the misunderstanding that maybe we can give them a chance to say, hey, it's similar to this industry, or it's like this one, or there's already a platform out there, or whatever, right? Where do you, go ahead, if one of you will lend to that, Nick.
Yeah, well, I think what this industry's always been faced with, that I think the rest of the world is now facing it. It's almost the opposite of what you said, is with uncertainty and volatility. Everybody is having to face that, since the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, right? This new normal, and what is it and how is it and why is it? No, nobody knows, right? If I did know, I'd be a hedge fund manager and not a supply chain consultant. So I think that is one aspect of how we're seeing now companies and larger enterprises react to that uncertainty, is with really understanding different sensitivities and scenarios. We don't know what's around the corner. We don't know if it will be federally legalized, how it will be federally, like most of the provinces in Canada where it's sold through government, like Ohio does with alcohol right now. Some of the more Western provinces in Canada, even they had differentiation in routes to market, right? Is Altria going to get a big one up because it's going to be allowed to be sold through convenience stores? Nobody knows, right?
Mhm.
So I think really thinking through when you're developing, hey, look, what is the layout of my facility going to be? How do I need to plan for this? How do I just organizationally need to behaviorally be set up? There is a lot of unknown, and there needs to be some, and just because things you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring doesn't mean you shouldn't plan for it, but you have to plan for most likely path and then contingency A, contingency B, and have an idea for that. Because as things start to shake out and become more clear, those that are agile and reactive and quick are going to have legs up over those that now can say, all right, now let me start thinking through this now that the path's clear. And I think that agility and flexibility is going to be a key culture aspect for those that are going to win as things unfold over time. Jay, anything you want to add to that?
I was just the only thing I was gonna say too, as well, is, there's so much M&A activity going on in the space, Mandi. Are you really acquiring the right partner? Is one aspect of it. Also, if you look at some of the more public companies who are on our stock exchanges, and you get into some of their financial reports, you'll see in a lot of their statement of cash flows, there's a lot of excess in inventory going to waste. A lot of obsolescence that's in that space, which again, inventory, cash is king, and if all your cash is tied up in your inventory, and then you're just throwing it away, there's some people don't appreciate that there are specific requirements that have to be met for this bud or plant to be used, either be used that's going to go into someone's body, if you will, or can it be used to go on again into like clothing and athletic wear. But there are certain requirements that must be met, and again, because it is so state to state dependent, that means it's also state to state different. There is not one overarching federal just like understanding of how it all should come together. Illinois is different than Ohio, which is different than Michigan, which is different than California. So you got to know those complexities, especially if you're going to go into the FMCG space. You're gonna have to know those complexities of, again, how do you distribute, what are the requirements and quality aspects that need to be met. So
what about on the commodity side? When we talk about, the fiber and the grain and the herd, are we looking at the exact same complications state to state? I imagine they're significantly less, right? And more on a different scale. Can you talk about that a little bit, especially as we're talking, comparable to big ag and much larger volume for, hundreds and thousands of acres?
Yeah. So maybe one thing to echo off of what Jay said as well is when I was at one of the conferences up in Toronto, law firms were, as in the very early stages of this, so this was after it had been passed federally as a consumer product in Canada, but before the edibles were legal. Mm-hmm. The law firm companies were talking about how they were spinning up two big parts of their practice. One was M&A, like Jay said, and the other was bankruptcy. Because if you don't get the financials right, you don't plan for inventory right, you could be revenue strong but cash poor, and in a position where you can't finance the success you have. And somebody doesn't come around quick enough to gobble you up and save you from yourself in an acquisition. And so, and we saw the same thing up in Canada as well, where there was still a lot of regulation that wasn't clear. And it was almost worse because we had a date that things were going to go live for edibles, but we didn't know what packaging requirements are going to be. We didn't know, do the drinks, were they going to have a special child-proof cap? And there was a lot of battle between the lobbying groups of why does vodka look like it does and looks like water and a 5-year-old can open it and twist it off, but now my cannabis packaging is going to have to need a fingerprint scan to get into it. And so I do think, to your point, Mandi, it is easy to get distracted by the unknown and the details on the regulatory side, where the nuts and bolts of production and planning and collaboration with suppliers or customers, the regulation isn't going to touch the core of that. That is basic supply chain 101. And that's why I wouldn't let the noise get your eye off the ball, to use a sports metaphor, like really focus on, and again, if you want to be agile and flexible, right? If you're just sitting around waiting to get all the regulation finally sorted out by each state, that is not an agile and flexible culture and behavior. Get the brass tacks down, get good at your standard operating procedures, get efficient, get effective. That will enable you then to pivot and react to the market.
Mm-hmm. And to go on top of that too, right? So you talked about like in the ag space. So you got to design the correct facility, and those requirements can be dependent upon state to state. The EPA is also going to be very heavily involved in terms of what sort of pesticides do you use to fertilize and to mature the plants, if you will. So these are different. Again, these are obviously temperature, right? So it's great in Florida to grow, maybe not so great to grow in other states where it's a little bit colder out, right? So that means, again, you have to then design a facility that can manage that temperature controlled requirements to produce your product outdoors, right? And then on top of that, look, land is no longer a commodity. Homes are being built all over the place. In Indiana, it's like every other week a farm goes down to a new subdivision going in. So land is becoming a premium, if you will. So you got to know exactly where's the right place then to put that farm, because from a supply chain perspective, how far is it then going to be away from your manufacturers, or if you have to go straight to packaging? That's where a lot of what Nick used to do in the pillar that I used to oversee, that network design. Where is the right place then to put this? If this is the hub of everything that's going on, then what are the spokes that are coming into it? I mean, you got to make sure that hub is placed in the correct way, where it's going to optimize all the transportation costs, all the 3PL delivery kind of aspects of it as well. Like that's where, again, it's going to be state dependent. And if you're only in your box, Mandy, you're not thinking about the bigger picture, you're gonna miss that, and you're gonna place yourself and put an investment in something that's just a waste, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said something earlier that land is no longer a commodity, right? When I talk to people and I say, well, like hemp is a commodity, why aren't we as a country or nation or globe adopting it as a commodity? Where is hemp? What do you see, I guess? And what is this? What does it mean for it to become a commodity? And where do you project it going?
To me, a lot of it is the stigma that falls around it. Congress, just before we went on Memorial Day break, they just they put it, or in the House again, they just tried to pass another deregulation, if you will, for cannabis as a whole, which also would include some of the hemp, if you will, that's associated with that. So honestly, right now it's a stigma, and that's where Miebach is also trying to be at the forefront here and say, look, it's no longer necessarily a quote unquote black market. People aren't appreciating the benefits that come from hemp, and it could be more cost effective. But we got to get over, and that's where the states are taking it on in their own hands to do it on their own. We'll see what the Biden administration looks like, and what it will look like as of least right now underneath Attorney General Garland, as he's now in charge of the Justice Department. We'll see if it changes. But right now, the states are taking it on themselves. I mean, just recently, we've also had three major senators, again, back in March, put out a video really promoting the legalization of these efforts, and trying to get people to recognize that this isn't such a faux pas anymore, and that we might be able to use hemp instead of cotton or other things to make products, to make furniture, to make clothing. But it takes a lot, and that's where not our firm, but many firms are then in that activist space on the Hills, trying to educate our lawmakers on these things, and trying to help them realize that there actually are differences between pure cannabis and the hemp aspect of it as well. And so in many cases, it's just lack of education, Mandy, long story short. And that's where, again, we're trying to bring that professional face to this market, to these areas. Nick, I don't know if there's anything else you want to chime in there on that.
No, I think
where do you see opportunity for AI? When you really talk about supply chain and Yeah, I'll let you kind of speak to that, because this is something that comes up, and it's something that I see a lot of reservation amongst people in adopting AI, for a number of reasons. So yeah, I'm kind of curious what your guys' opinion is and how it has a role in especially the industrial manufacturing. When we go up against plastics and cotton and these big industries, that there's a reason we haven't had the opportunity until now.
Yeah, and I think this is where there's actually a potential benefit, because companies are dealing with more of a clean sheet. You're not this large plastic or wood manufacturer that's already invested, $20 million in a super complex advanced planning system. Our digitalization team, this is the big thing that they're focusing on nowadays is, like I said earlier, how can I digitalize my decision making? How can I make it so that way I'm doing decision making, leveraging digital tools, leveraging data, and getting to a point of predictive, prescriptive analytics. And there's a lot that can be done, and we're doing it in a lot of other different industries with, whether it's demand sensing, whether it's demand forecasting, on the planning, on the scheduling side, that, we're teaching like 6-year-olds how to code in Python nowadays, right, in school. So, the barriers of entry to introduce this, it's harder always to introduce it, to build kind of a machine learning algorithm or artificial intelligence algorithm. And that's what we're specializing in. But once that back-end architecture is built, right, we can put on a nice user interface where you don't need a master coder or a PhD in mathematics to actually run it and utilize it. And there we can then turn over, this very custom tailored. And I think this is good, especially in for smaller based companies, or for an industry that doesn't have, 100 years of planning systems having been adapted and developed for it. This is where some very custom tools can be very affordable and leveraged very quickly and adapted very easily. And this digitalization space has been our quickest growing coming out of the pandemic, because it doesn't matter if it's a small mom and pop company that was just not relying on data and got burnt, or a large enterprise that just realized that, like, my legacy systems didn't meet the sudden shift to direct to consumer e-commerce, or the sudden backing up of ocean freight at the ports. This is where, no matter what scale or size, these types of tools can be affordable and leveraged and introduced in a way that can make a distinct advantage, that you're taking the human element and bias out of it. That if you ask employee number 1 to do the analysis and then employee number 3 to do the analysis, they're both going to come up with a completely different answer. Or even worse, they come up with the same answer, but they do it completely differently. And then when one assumption changes, now you're going to get 2 different answers, and now we have misalignment. So these are really areas where it sounds futuristic. It sounds like it's, Skynet and Terminator, and it should be it's not. We are launching these things. We're adapting these things, and companies are seeing benefits out of it.
It's hard for, I think, people, it's like they say, you can't train an old dog new tricks. And I think that's really where it's even difficult for me to wrap my head around how you can do something like that. And so it's almost, you don't know what you don't know, and until you're exposed, right? Somewhere I see huge benefit for AI technology is being able to measure and create consistent, steady product as we feed these big supply chains. And right now, that piece in our supply chain isn't here, right, at all. And so I'm kind of curious more to how to develop that.
Yeah, I remember when we're up in Canada again, testing out different equipment to try to pack out flour. Right? It was like, all right, let's use this machine that had done it for carrots before. Let's use this, and once we got some good fits, there are things you can do with putting sensors on that machinery, right? Even if it's, hey, when is the machine about to go down for some predictive maintenance, right? This is a very easy one actually nowadays with artificial intelligence, or leveraging the scale that's actually measuring out how good the machine is doing on a certain, there's just so many things you can do that if you're measuring something, you should be able to take that data and then get better with it. And let's not rely on somebody having free time to crunch numbers to do that. Let's set up this mathematical formula that's then going to continually be monitoring that and giving you signals when things might be going wrong or things are going wrong. So that way you're not dealing with like customer complaints that like, hey, weights are off what you thought they were supposed to be. You're actually able to stay on top of that in real time.
And again, this is not unique to this industry. I mean, we have long established industries like automotive and aerospace. Again, I came from that space. The same executives, I don't care where you are, they always get a haze over their eyes when you start talking about control charts and putting CPKs type measurements into place to get Six Sigma based measurements and to building quality. Again, that's the education piece of this, Mandy. I mean, so as a former adjunct professor, I used to tell my students who would go a lot into owning their own businesses, like in gyms or in baking, if you will. They all think this class is, in the beginning, they all think this class is stupid. What am I going to get out of this? But just take, for example, you go to the bar, right? And if you've ever seen, Bar Rescue, some John Tavers on Bar Rescue, there's math and measurements that go into how efficiently a bar is ran, how much a pour should be out of a wine glass or into a wine glass or out of a spirit bottle into a glass, if you will. There's math that goes into that. How far away, the height is of a bar top table is at a bar can really make, what they've seen is it can make people feel small in that environment, or they can make people feel higher in that environment. All that math, which can go into a bar, which can go into a bakery, which goes into, hey, where should you place your right gym equipment in your workout facility? It's the same deal that goes into this hemp. We were working with this client in Canada. They're literally pulling buds by hand, right? So the amount of labor required just to do that, because this person is looking at it almost like, if you think of like the Oompa Loompas, looking at each piece of nugget to make sure that it's right. There's other ways we can go about doing that, where you introduce these robots, you introduce some of this other AI technology and digitalization efforts into this that can do it for you. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say I'm trying to replace the labor force. By no means am I making that argument, but there are ways and efficient ways though to improve your operations.
It made it so farms failed this year because of the lack of efficiency. They didn't understand the labor that was going to go into it. Not just this year, right? The last how many years?
Well, and look, like we can talk about how unfortunate it is for automation to cost jobs, but like the labor crunch in this country, especially, and I don't want this to get into, I've been very careful to try to stay on any political argument about should things be legalized, should they not, how should the legalization work, or I don't want to get into like economic policy either here. Again, I lived that world in the past. I want to
I'm retired from that.
Yeah, exactly. But like certain economic policies now make the decision for an individual to return to work or not more difficult than if they weren't be there. Right or wrong, that's the mathematics. And so, we do have a labor crunch. We had a labor crunch before this. At least on the warehousing side, like people don't want to be warehouse workers. And there is a larger labor crunch right now that I think you could attest some of it to economic policy. I think you could attest some of it to people honestly not wanting to put themselves in what may or may not be an unsafe situation. Again, depending on your personal beliefs. And I think all of that is and we're getting to a point where we have clients that we've looked at automation for them in the past that have turned it down because of the economics of it. This is just the reality. They're saying, look, I don't care about if it's going to be a year 3 or year 4 return on investment. I can't get the labor and I can't survive operating like this. So like automation is being introduced at a much more rapid pace all across the supply chain, all across different industries here. Us being a European rooted organization, we've seen how in the States, automation has lagged behind Europe and Central Europe specifically. And now I saw something from one of the real estate firms that like lease costs in, the Inland Empire of California, where a lot of warehouses are, has gone up like 25% in the last like 90 days or something. Don't quote me exactly on that, but like lease rates are exploding because people need to do more e-commerce, doing more e-commerce. They need to be, companies feel like they need to compete against Amazon. So I need more DCs closer to more customer bases. People are holding on to are trying to hold on to more inventory as soon as they can get it, with how much the supply chain has lengthened with China. And like all of this is tending itself to costs are going up, which makes it either an easier decision or I have to make that decision for automation.
I think this lends to opportunity, right? We talk about, are we losing employees, right? By me building a manufacturing facility that will only employ 2 employees because it's mostly ran by AI, compared to 36 employees and get mediocre product at the end, right? My consistency and ability to provide opportunity to then feed the market, right? So, and I use this as an example. If I process hemp fiber and I now have how many products that can be made from that, if I can provide a consistent, steady product that's affordable and competitive on a global scale. And this is where, job cost, we will never compete on a global scale because of hourly wage right now. And right, wrong, or indifferent, like you said, it's reality. And if we're going to bring a more sustainable environment and compete globally, what other options do we have than?
Well, and the Amazon effect used to just be about Amazon alone, but as you now see here, they're also going through their own public union discussions, if you will, and that is going to trickle down or over to other industries, and because as a whole, it's warehousing as a whole, right? That this unionization is going to be looking at. So again, if companies are not appreciating that forthcoming, again, right, wrong, different, for or against unions, it doesn't really matter. You got to be planning for it, and you got to be prepared to address it, to have it come on. And if you're not keeping your eyes, and that's where, again, you use external consultants like ourselves, we keep our eye on the industry. We keep our eye on the trends that are happening in and out of one particular industry, because if it happens in one, it's more often than not, the same effects or some of those effects are going to come into your industry for whatever reason, forced or unforced. You're working at home, Nick's working at home, I'm working in my old house where I grew up in high school due to COVID. Working from home back 2 years ago would have been unheard of, right? But now it is now part of a natural thing. And as, again, East Coast versus West Coast, as you bring in people in or you letting people stay working from home, there's so many like differences of opinions and thoughts around it that it's not even within industry. Companies within that industry have different opinions on how they're going to approach that topic.
Well, it's staying in these. Go ahead.
It's a tale as old as time, right? Like, because Kraft was able to figure out a way to make self-stable cheese and a product that people could rely on, and he innovated, right, by taking something that had been made ever since the Egyptians, 4,000 years ago, or whatever it was. Like, he was able to come up with a way to make a more safe, shelf-stable product. It was innovative, right? And then he found out a way, to leverage pasteurization to do that, right? Which was an old technology, but new application, right? Boom, won and cornered like at 60% of the cheese market at one point. It's going to be the same thing here. Those that are able to be very customer centric, like, what are the issues my customers are facing? How do I solve that? And do that in a way that's different than the way we've always done it before, which back then was just shaving off the moldy cheese and giving people the next slice underneath it, right? Like, those are the individuals that are really going to win big time versus just survive. So,
well, I was just going to say too, and to lend to that is, we cannot stay in these silos anymore. It really takes multiple, right? And so I look at an agency like yours and Miebach, where if I have a concern, or if a company has a concern and it is not your expertise, you have somebody else on the team that is, right? And that does dive deep into that. And I think that that's extremely powerful when we're developing a new industry, right? Is we've got to be able to link arms and lean on those that know, not what we think we know.
Well, and we all see things differently too. What I might see, Nick may see completely differently.
Yes.
Mandy, you may see it completely differently as well. And that's why we always bring in a diverse team to our projects, to our opportunities, because we all see things differently. We all have different backgrounds and expertise. And that's why we believe in diversity at Miebach, if you will.
Totally.
And so, yeah.
Okay, so I have a couple last questions, and then I want to share, how do people get in touch with you? Right, real quick. How if somebody's looking to connect with you guys and wants to reach out, how do they connect?
Right now? Oh, okay.
Send me a text message. I hate email. LinkedIn is a great for a first connection. Email is something I do not enjoy just because I get so many, and my email, doesn't matter how many times I unsubscribe from something. There's just a service that's selling my email to everybody. But I think connecting me is on LinkedIn, and then either connecting via Teams or whatnot. My email is banich@miebach.com. So, send me that first email. We can get a discussion started, especially if it's, I think if it's something very specific to the things Jay has talked about in his expertise and purview, I'm going to flip you to Jay anyways. If it's more of a wider, bigger, I'm not so sure question, shoot me that email at banich@miebach.com. We can get that discussion started. I much prefer just jumping on a call and, ironing something out versus trading emails back endlessly. But then Jay, you want to talk about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So same kind of same boat, couple additional ones as well. So I'm on LinkedIn as well, Jason Jackson on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me at jackson@miebach.com. I also, with one of our partners, I host a clubhouse monthly where we talk about certain trends that are happening in the sativa industry as a whole. In fact, this past week, we actually just talked about regulation and what the current landscape looks like in the U.S. federally. So we're on Clubhouse as well. Certainly the best way is checking out our website. So www.miebach.com. Let me make sure I get all the W's there. Sorry. Where you can learn more about our services. And you can also see a lot about our thought leadership. And when we produce a lot of thought leadership and content, that's either industry specific or industry agnostic. Here in a couple of days, you're actually going to see a new white paper that's going to be coming up, kind of talking about some of the similarities that we've seen in cannabis based on some experiences that we've had out of Canada, where it talks about more in depth about the similarities between the four industries that we've discussed. So we do a lot of thought leadership. Obviously, Mandi, I've come to some of the networking events as well. So if someone says they can't get a hold of me, I'd be really, really shocked, because I, like Nick, I do text me as well. My card's out there, LinkedIn's out there. I'm even on Instagram. So
as I say, feel free to reach out. If anybody has questions or problems, I can obviously help make connections. I can help, figure out who or which one to connect to, or anybody else on their team. But yes, also. Okay, so when we talk about other industries, right, if we're looking to bridge this gap, and we talk about, we talked about the liquor and the beer and the agriculture and the automotive industry, we're talking about the industrial manufacturing of product, right? Going into plastics and biofuels. And what type of info, or what do we need to provide or give to these big industries? What are they looking for in order, before they come on and say, listen, we're going to really start utilizing or dive into this industry? How do we bridge that gap?
That's a good question. I don't know if I'm the right person to answer that, Mandi. I think if I was just going to tackle it academically, it would be, I think, really focusing on, the product, the quality of it, the benefit of it, the advantages of it, and trying to, I actually think sometimes there's an over blaming. I don't know if blaming is the right word, but there's an overemphasis of like, well, because it's hemp product, it's a cannabis derived, people don't understand it. I think if you look at, some of the percentages that are out there and how many people are for legalization, federally or whatever, like the person on the other end of the table, there's a chance they have similar beliefs as you. So I think like really drilling down and not almost having like little brother syndrome, like, well, because it's this, they're already like this, the deck's already stacked against me kind of attitude, and really like focusing on what it is, how it solves, the benefit, and really hammering down on that. I think that's the best route forward. But I think sometimes that's used as a crutch of why things don't move at the pace it does. I'm not saying that there aren't certain people out there that like there's a VP of purchasing that would be like, absolutely not, because I don't believe in this, which they have every right to, and just like everybody has every right to believe in the product. But I would just like, don't just use that as a crutch or an excuse. Focus on the product, what it actually is, the things it solves, the benefits it has, and just focus solely on that. Because like I said, you don't know how the other person's prejudiced or not on the other side of the table from you.
Yeah. And focus on your values as a company. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Because we said it can go in between different industries, there are a lot of benefits that you can derive from a medicinal use standpoint. There are a lot of benefits you can derive from this, again, from the fast moving consumer good and retail space as well. But you got to focus in on what is your company's core values, right? And what is it that you're trying to go after? The other thing too is whether you're doing blue ocean strategy or SWOT analysis, whatever strategic mindset you're looking at too, look at where the industry is going as well. Look at politics and where, every 2 years the House, both chambers go up or down in certain one way or another. But I will also say too, there on both sides, there are parties and members who are for legalization. It's not just a left versus right. There are even some, conservatives who are for this as well because of helping how it helps veterans with their PTSD and mental health issues and things like that. The tax implications that come from this as well. So kind of like what Nick said, if you're thinking about it, you got to remain open-minded, but you got to do your homework. You got to make sure, like anything, you got to make sure it fits into what it is you want to accomplish as your brand. That is, regardless if you're talking about this or you're talking about any other industries merging or acquiring another. There are people who don't like cigarette smoke, so they don't want to work with some of the big tobacco firms, and that's okay. There are folks who don't like, alcohol because of what it could do to people's states. So they don't, they're against, alcohol. So they don't support some of the big liquor and beer firms. That's okay too. You just got to know what is your core values and what you want to accomplish. And then you got to do your homework. It's not an overnight sleep on it decision. So.
Right. So you guys said a few things that I just want to reiterate is coming to the table with solutions, right? And not just the problem, but really focusing on that solution and how you're solving that problem. I just can't say that enough. It's something we talk about, and it's something I try to bring to the table is we all know there's problems in the industry, right? Those that win are going to be those that really innovate and are able to execute on it. Last is, where do you see biggest opportunity in the industry right now?
That's a good one. Jay, you want to feel that one while I come up with an answer?
Sure. So when you say, you mean opportunity to improve or opportunity to jump into a space? Because there's people use that word sometimes differently. So what type of opportunity? Because I do have an answer for both. I'm not trying to deflect.
I want both. Give me both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Opportunity. So opportunity to improve. We've already talked about some of how are you currently running your operations for sure. Are you designing your facility in the right ways? For sure. Those are where the opportunities certainly lie. The other one that I'd say in terms of just growing your business, the M&A space for sure. But you got to know too, what's the right state to be in, right? Should I be in a Midwestern state that's now legalizing, or should I open up retail in a Southern state that's maybe opening up, if you will? Again, a lot of companies are pumping a lot of money into new facilities. Are those facilities designed the right way? They're also going to eventually start looking at 3PLs, so third-party logistics, right? Are you going to look into you running the warehouse, you running the operations, or are you going to want to outsource that to somebody who knows what they're doing and who does it every day, who runs warehousing, let's just say for an example, every day? The other thing too is again, thank you, COVID, e-commerce has exploded. So if you can, with hemp, you can mail it in the mail federally, right? There are certain hemp products and CBD products that you can mail, right? So what's that last mile delivery going to look like? Is a product going to be there within my expected overnight, Prime membership, or is it going to be there within 7 days? Again, those logistical opportunities are huge. And last but not least, I will also say too is importing and exporting. So a lot of countries outside of ours are doing this as well, and they're also looking for the product that comes from our country. So if you don't know how to work customs, you don't appreciate a large ship getting stuck in the Suez Canal, and your product is cooking up in the container out there, well, then you're going to be you're going to be up, what's creek without a paddle. So those are opportunities where you got to be thinking about, how does my entire, from all the way from plan, source, and make, all the way to deliver and return, the elements of a supply chain. If you're not thinking about all those aspects and the intricacies that go into that entire value stream, that's an opportunity right there. So, Nick?
And I think for me, just kind of to go back to one of the first points to re-anchor it, is just like volatility is here. It's here to stay. If you think that a giant sweeping Senate resolution to federally legalize is going to then get rid of volatility, no, like, you think it's volatile right now, just wait till, the big Canada-based companies and the tobacco companies can start throwing their weight around in this space. So I think, just getting comfortable with ambiguity and volatility. And again, which requires you, and Mandy, I think you summarized it perfectly, focus on your solution, focus on your value proposition. You're anchored and core in that. You can then tell that story no matter how things shake out, right? And you don't need to be able to solve, look, some of the half of the Gartner top 25 supply chains rely on us, and the other half rely on our competitors to help solve their supply chain issues. So don't let the things you're not an expert in become the derailing point. And yeah, this is trying to hard sell you that you need Miebach to succeed, but I had to throw it in there. But seriously, like, volatility is going to be here. It's only like federal legalization is not the magic answer that's going to take away these unknowns. It's just going to be a different set of unknowns and a different set of problems to wade through. So anchor back on your product, what you're trying to solve for, who the ideal segment of customer base is for you to reach to, and make sure you're good and squared away on that. And then you can figure out a way, or find others to help you figure out the way to actually get all the way through the value chain, like Jay said.
Absolutely. Well, I could keep talking, because as you're speaking, there's more and more things like the sustainability conversation and where it plays a role, right? That is such an important part of the hemp industry, or the consumer-driven market, or making sure your story is right. What is that story? Because that really feeds into this consumer market, and this is what brands are after. They need a story from seed to shelf, and how, where that fits in. And then what about bringing manufacturing back into the United States? When we talk about opportunity, it feeds into these supply chains and all of the value propositions we've been talking about all hour. And it's not just U.S. within any borders, right? If I'm looking at my own community, what does that look like if we have a land hurricane again and we're knocking out millions of acres of our number one crop, right? And so there's all of these things that just need to come in place. And then bringing it back to, I am not a supply chain expert. I do not know these things. And it's easy to look over when I'm head down in creating a podcast or a media and not looking at all of these other pieces that are more important, if not, or equally important, if not more important, right? So I do.
If I could, yeah, sustainability and risk management are the other two areas that for sure we should discuss, because those also significantly face those industries as well. 100%. And I completely, and so in supply chain, you've got, when you talk about sustainability, you talk about the plant, but there's also the triple bottom line effect, right? So you're also talking about plant, people, right? And then the company itself, profits, right? All three of those have got, it's a synergy, right? It's a triangle. All three of those have got to be there together. So how you're looking at sustainability is important. Bringing on the right people into your organization who know what they're doing, hiring smart people, and hiring motivated people too, because you don't have to be book smart. If you're street smart and you're motivated to work, bring them on board as well. And then look at the waste that might be within your operations, and how do you reduce those? That way you can increase your profits and your revenues.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I'm excited to bring you back, Jay, because I'd love to have you on, both of you. I'd love to have you on and do a Q&A panel with a big group of us. We get 50 to 100 people per call, so I invite anybody to join, where we can really dive into some of this. The cool part about it is everybody that registers, see, there goes my daughter.
Yeah.
She had clothes on, right?
Yeah, don't worry, she did.
But I'd love to bring you back. because I want to open this discussion more, right? I only know so much. We get into a little bit, but when we get 50 of us in the room and can start filtering some questions, we may be able to dive into what is the nitty gritty of each of these projects, you know?
Yeah, I think it helps to talk about a specific use case, specific problem.
Absolutely.
10,000 ways to solve it, but at least given some line of sight on how to address the problem or how others have done it. Because again, I mean, supply chain becomes such a big word and it touches so many different aspects. You know, I think it's always easier when you're like, hey, let's dive in on some specific problem statements and where there's opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's bring some of this together and I'd love to continue to make connections. I have so many people, obviously, that are going through my mind that I'm like, oh, I need to bring them into this conversation. I need to make this intro. Anyways, thank you guys so much for joining today. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Mandy. We appreciate you having us.
Absolutely. Thank you. See you later.
Yeah. Bye, guys. Bye, Nick.
Bye.